Do you think the United States and Western Europe are made up of imperialist, colonialist, resource-exploiting, greedy, grasping, brown-skin-hating people whose values are not worth defending? If you think this question is absurd and that no one thinks this way, you would be very much mistaken. Many people do. And what's even more disturbing, many of these people were born and live in the West. In other words, they've come to despise their own culture. This thinking is the product of a doctrine widely taught in our schools. It's known as multiculturalism, the belief that all cultures are equal. Or to put it another way, no culture's values, art, music, political system, or literature are better or worse than any other. But is this really true? Some years ago, Nobel Prize-winning novelist Saul Bellow created a major controversy when he said, "Find me the Tolstoy of the Zulus or the Proust of the Papuans, and I would be happy to read him." For this, Bellow was accused of racism. The charge was nonsense. Bellow wasn't saying that the Zulus and Papuans are incapable of producing great novelists. He was saying that as far as he knew, they hadn't. But just by raising the possibility that some cultures have contributed more than others, he violated the chief tenet of multiculturalism. More recently, President Donald Trump expressed a similar sentiment in Warsaw, Poland. We write symphonies, we pursue innovation, we treasure the rule of law and protect the right to free speech and free expression. We empower women as pillars of our society and of our success. That is who we are. Those are the priceless ties that bind us together as a civilization. For this, Trump was roundly condemned by the multiculturalists. How could he say these things, one writer wrote, as if these were unique qualities to white-dominated nations instead of universal truths of the human race across all cultures? Here's the problem. Are values such as innovation, rule of law, free expression, and women's empowerment equally held across all cultures? If all cultures are equal, how does one account for the fact that for the past 500 years, it has been one culture, the culture of the West, and now of America, that has shaped the world? Multiculturalists explain it in terms of oppression. Western civilization, they say, became so powerful because it is so evil. The study of Western civilization, they insist, should focus on colonialism and slavery, the unique mechanisms of Western oppression. But colonialism and slavery are not uniquely Western at all. They are universal. The British conquered India and ruled it for 300 years. But before the British, the Persians, the Mongols, the Muslims, and Alexander the Great had done exactly the same thing, conquered large parts of India. Indeed, the British were the 6th or 7th colonial invader to occupy India. As for slavery, it has existed in every culture. It was prevalent in ancient China, in ancient India, in Greece and Rome, and in Africa. American Indians practiced slavery long before Columbus set foot here. What is uniquely Western, in fact, is not slavery, but the abolition of slavery. And what distinguishes the West from all other cultures are the institutions of democracy, capitalism, and science. These institutions developed because of a peculiar dynamism of Athens and Jerusalem, a synthesis of classical reason and Judeo-Christian morality. And it is these institutions, I believe, that comprise the source of Western strength and explain the West's long-standing dominance in the world. The West's greatest strength is not merely its military power, but also the unparalleled power of its ideas and institutions. But what about America? If America is a nation of immigrants, mostly non-white immigrants, doesn't that by definition make it a multicultural society? No. America is a multi-ethnic society. We don't want it to be a multicultural society. I'm an immigrant from India. My wife is an immigrant from Venezuela. Despite our differences of ethnic background, we have both assimilated to the unique values of America, the values embodied in our Constitution and our laws, the pursuit of happiness, the American dream. So, no, the United States and Western Europe are not made up of imperialist, colonialist, resource-exploiting, greedy, grasping, brown-skin-hating people. Our values are worth defending, not just because they are ours, but because they are good. I'm Dinesh D'Souza for Prager University. Thank you for watching this video. As a nonprofit, PragerU relies on donations from viewers like you. Please consider making a donation.
All right, everybody. I have Dinesh D'Souza on the line. He is one of those in the rarefied realm of doesn't need an introduction. Do you agree with me, Dinesh D'Souza? Do you need an introduction?
Well, I don't know about that, but
you're getting there. I got to tell you, Dinesh D'Souza is doing the video this week. It just went up today for PragerU on are all cultures equal? Are some cultures superior to others? Some cultures better than others is the official name. Dinesh, you and I on this issue and on so many issues are totally in sync. Do you have the same reaction that I do, that at times you actually have to pinch yourself? Why is this even a question?
You know, I remember first encountering this issue when I was a student at Dartmouth, and I had been in America for only a year, and the topic of multiculturalism was very new, but it was being quite aggressively peddled, this notion that all cultures are equal. And I remember, partly because of my own peculiar status as someone who had just come from another country, thinking to myself, if all cultures are truly equal, if no culture is better or worse, superior or inferior to any other, why would people ever move from one culture to another? In other words, immigration appears to be, on the face of it, a kind of, you may say, walking refutation of cultural relativism. Because think about it, we all have a natural affinity for our own culture. We're born into it. It's all we know, our family, our friends, our school, our neighbors. So it must take a lot to uproot yourself and voluntarily go to another society. And why would you do that if you didn't think that another society, on the balance, was going to give you a better life, represented a better hope for the future? So that immigration, in that sense, is a kind of decisive refutation with your feet of cultural relativism.
You know, the problem with what you said is it makes a lot of sense. So that immediately disqualifies the academic community.
Well, let's think about why they're so eager to push this. I think what's really going on, and we see something similar, you know, multiculturalism is built on this idea of relativism. And for many years, I would spend a lot of intellectual energy combating relativism in philosophical terms. And then one day I scratched my head and I realized none of these people I'm arguing against are true relativists. Because if you ever attack one of the sacred principles that they believe in,
yes, exactly.
They become absolutists immediately.
Yes, right. Like, that's right, of course. If you just say there are two genders, you're wrong.
Exactly. You pick one of their sacred cows and begin to slaughter it, and their absolutism. So relativism, in other words, is a tactical weapon that they're using to dismantle traditional morality, but all the same time they uphold a rival morality that they believe to be absolute.
I got to tell you, because you mentioned your college experience, this was one of my epiphanies when I was at graduate school. The professor, one professor in one class would tell me all morality is relative, and then the next professor, or even that professor, would then say, and the war in Vietnam is immoral.
Exactly. That is so true. Now, what's happening really is this is the reason that multiculturalism, sometimes you have to ask the question, if something is really dumb, how does it get as far as it has? How has it made the progress that it has? Mm-hmm. How does it lull gullible people into believing it? Well, I think the answer is there's a deep confusion between having a multiracial society and having a multicultural society.
Exactly.
It's very possible for us, in fact, we largely are a multiracial society.
Right.
But the multiracial people who come to America, whether from South Korea or India or Barbados, they may be brown-skinned or even yellow-skinned, but they speak English. There's no reason they can't embrace the Declaration of Independence or the pursuit of happiness. So the American dream becomes a concept large enough to encompass multiple races and colors.
That's why E pluribus unum is our motto, from many one. Listen, you did a great job. It's a terrific video, everybody. and truly, your kids at college need to see it, among others. And Dinesh, thank you, because you really you've done so much good for us. And
Dennis, really appreciate it. My wife Debbie, of course, made a great video in Venezuela, so she was the first video maker for the D'Souza family.
I think you're the first. You may be the first couple to have done this. Hey, congratulations, the D'Souzas and PragerU. Thanks for listening. I'm Dennis Prager.
Welcome back to the Dennis Prager Show. My name is Rose. I do my own show for Salem, Rose Unplugged. Check me out on Facebook. It's Rose Unplugged. And on Twitter, it's Rose@Rose_Unplugged. Joining me this afternoon is the Thomas W. Smith Fellow at the Manhattan Institute and a contributing editor of City Journal. She's also the author of the book, The War on Cops. Welcome to the show, Heather MacDonald. Heather, how are you today?
Good. Thanks for having me on, Rose. I appreciate it.
Oh, I've been wanting to have you on for a long time, and I'll tell you why. There is a couple of things that you've written about that just really struck a chord with me, probably because I have a son who is absolutely awesome and I really don't worry about, but he is, a millennial. And when you look around at what's going on right now on college campuses, Heather, I used to say, wait until these snowflakes join the real world. But then you wrote a piece that said, guess what? That real world is rapidly becoming very much the same type of environment that we see on the campuses right now. So they're not going to be traumatized when they reach the real world. The real world is starting to look a whole lot like what they've been experiencing.
Of course not. They're joining corporations, they're joining human resources departments, they're leading foundations, and they're bringing with them the same preposterous victimology that has been fed them for 4 years of college by their social science and humanities professors that says that America is this endemically racist country, homophobic, sexist. They're demanding that people that express contrary views to that be silenced. We saw that this summer with Google, remarkably firing a computer engineer who had done nothing other than write a well-reasoned memo questioning the premises of Google's massive diversity programs. It's extremely significant. And the idea that there's going to be some dividing line between a common sense real world and an academic world that is devoted to narcissism and delusion and self-pity, I think is we're fooling ourselves.
So the ones that we really have to say, wait until they get into the real world, are the ones who aren't snowflakes, who can get jobs done, who aren't afraid of dissenting opinions, and yet and I feel sorry for them now. I mean, they're going to have to work within these environments where everything they say could be suspect, everything they say could be offensive. I mean, honest to God, I don't know what to think about the young children the young adults that are coming out who are sensible, who can handle, differences of opinion. I worry for them, quite frankly.
Well, this thing is moving so fast. It's really difficult to overstate how quickly the fear of saying something wrong that can be judged, again, out of utter paranoia and melodramatic delusion as racist or homophobic is spreading. I was supposed to give a major speech on policing this November in a big city that's having a mayoral contest, and the people who had invited me, who are supportive of the police, canceled it because they were so worried that there would be protests that would interfere with the course of the mayoral election. My message on police is based on data. It contradicts the Black Lives Matter narrative that we have a systemically biased policing in this country and that we're living through an epidemic of racially biased police shootings of black males. I have data that refute that. But that information is finding fewer and fewer outlets into the real world because people are terrified that the media will jump on them and falsely accuse them of racism simply for speaking the truth.
Astounding. So let me ask you a question. Can you hold on, because we do have to take a break here. I'm sorry, it's a little choppy, but we'll be back, though, with more. Can you hang with us just for a few moments?
Oh, sure.
Thank you. We're talking to Heather McDonald, the author of The War on Cops, and we're talking about the snowflakes having a chilling effect even beyond the campus. We'll be back with Heather McDonald and more. Also, I want to talk, Heather, to you when we come back about the norms, the bourgeois norms that you wrote about, higher ed's latest taboo. We'll be back with more Dennis Prager Show. Oh, my goodness, I need a glass of water. More of the Dennis Prager Show right after we take this break, and Heather McDonald. Stay with us. Okay, welcome back to the show. This is the Dennis Prager Show, of course. My name is Rose. I do a show called Rose Unplugged for Salem Radio Network. You can check me out on Facebook, Rose Unplugged. Twitter, it's at Rose_Unplugged. Joining us this afternoon is Heather McDonald. She is the Thomas W. Smith Fellow at Manhattan Institute and a contributing editor of City Journal. Hey, so Heather, thanks for hanging in there with us through the break. You know, there was an op-ed in the Philadelphia Inquirer not too long ago, and the authors of this op-ed talked about the norms: hard work, self-discipline, marriage, respect for authority, all those things that you and I were taught. All those things, I believe, led us to a very successful, very healthy adulthood. But they were in so much trouble. There was such an uproar at the University of Pennsylvania, where one of the authors, Amy Wax, teaches. People don't want to hear that anymore. That was offensive to people. What was so offensive about that?
Well, they tried to shoehorn her statements ridiculously into the claim that she was being a white supremacist. I mean, that shows how hysterical the quality of debate is on American campuses today. She said that some cultures are better than others in preparing people for a successful life in a modern 21st century economy. What she was talking about there was contrasting underclass culture, poverty culture, with bourgeois traditional norms. And she specifically mentioned the white working class that is getting caught up in opiate drug use, high rates of out-of-wedlock child rearing, as well as the anti-acting white, anti-educational achievement rap culture. So she was hardly focusing on minorities. She talked about the destruction of social capital among lower class, working class whites that are getting sucked into drug addiction and illegitimacy. Nevertheless, 50% of the Penn faculty wrote a unprecedented letter denouncing her. Student petitions have demanded that she be banned from teaching first-year classes. And she's basically been left to dry by the campus administration.
You know, that's very sad, because what she said, you know, we're talking about, do you want to have a successful, do you want to have a healthy life, adulthood? And here are the steps you can take that could pretty much assure that you will have that. What happened to, you know, I remember coming out of school thinking, I want to be a success. I want to make money. I want to have a nice home. There's nothing wrong with that. And it goes to the overall wellness, quite frankly, of the individual. But, you know, when we see all of this, and Heather, you know, I'm very concerned. I mean, do you think there's ever going to be a shift here in the way these young people are thinking? Is this something that's going to prevail, really? Can it live? Does it have a long life? This attitude, this intolerance of opposing views, this, you know, always seeking to be a victim or feeling that they're a victim, you know, no matter what is being said or being done.
I'm not optimistic, Rose. I know that's not a good stance on for the radio. We're supposed to be future-oriented and believe things are possible. But you see, this is not originating with young people. It's originating with the university adults and with increasingly K through 12 adults. And this all grows out of the racial and sex victimology. So the free speech stuff is bad. It is extremely bad that we are losing the ability to have an exchange of ideas and challenge orthodoxies in the public arena. That is very bad. But I would say what is worse than that is what is driving it, which is this relentless message that America is divided between oppressed and oppressors, and that to be a minority, an underrepresented minority in this country, i.e. black and Hispanic, because Asians don't count as people of color because they're academically successful, but that to be black or Hispanic is to have opportunities denied you at every turn. That is the exact opposite of the case. I don't know a single elite institution that is not bending over backwards to try and hire and promote as many minorities as possible. We have racial preferences that are ubiquitous, not just in our educational system, but in the corporate world as well. But we're telling people to be resentful, we're telling people to hate, to feel like they live in an oppressive regime, whereas in fact America is, at this point, the most tolerant and compassionate society in human history.
Oh, indeed they are. I mean, there's this oh my gosh, there's a resistance group, and I can't think of the name right now, that's actually following along the lead of Occupy Wall Street in terms of tactics, and they want to begin on November, right around this year anniversary of the election that we had last year in November. And this young girl in her early 20s said that she wants to fight against and resist this fascist administration, the Trump-Pence fascist administration. And, what's really sad is that she has no idea what fascism is all about. They're out there fighting an enemy that doesn't exist in the White House anyway. But more importantly, it perhaps because when you look at what's happening, I'm reading now on college campuses, they're segregating now. There are separate rooms for the blacks and whites to have dinner. How are we regress? I mean, how is that progression? How is that healthy for anybody? This is just, it's insane. These children really don't even know what they're talking about, and a lot of them don't understand where we are and where we could be. I got to go. I'm so sorry. Heather McDonald, thank you so much for joining us this morning, author of the book The War on Cops, and also contributing editor of the City Journal. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you, Rose.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks to all of you. I really enjoyed it. Dennis Prager Show. He's awesome. He'll be back. And I really enjoyed being with you. Check me out on Facebook, Rose Unplugged. On Twitter, it's @Rose_Unplugged. It's been really a lot of fun. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Greg. Everybody, okay? Have a good day. Have a good evening. It was fun to be with you.
Hi, everybody. By the way, I'm looking on my list here, and we got a caller in Florida and one in Arizona, and actually two in Florida. 2 hours or more, and I feel terrible that you've been on the line this much. You've aged since you first called in, but I might be able to take your call, but I might not. I just feel bad. I have a very important author on because she's written a very important book. And she is Meghan O'Sullivan. She is the Jeane Kirkpatrick Professor of the Practice of International Affairs at Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government. Holy crow, that may be the longest title I have ever had in introducing an author.
I apologize for that.
By the way, do you know it by heart?
I do. I
Okay.
can almost say it in one breath.
Go ahead.
So, my title?
Yeah.
I'm the Jeane Kirkpatrick Professor of the Practice of International Affairs at Harvard University's Kennedy School.
Okay.
There you go.
Now, I just want you to know I am somewhat reading your mind, and you're thinking, is this guy for real? Why did I say yes to this invitation?
No, I have often tried to squeeze that title into business cards and other things, so you're making a valid point.
Okay. Thank you for understanding. By the way, I just want you to know I knew Jeane Kirkpatrick because
really?
Yes, I was on the board of Empower America.
Fantastic.
So
I unfortunately never met her.
I had a feeling.
I'm honored to hold her chair, but I never had the
moment she was a great woman in personally and in the thought world. So I just thought I would share that with you.
Nice. Well, that's good to know.
The book is Windfall: How the New Energy Abundance Upends Global Politics and Strengthens America's Power. You would think there would be 50 books on this. It is so big. And yet here I am awaiting the book, and you seem to have written it.
Well, that's good. I'm glad that means that I'm meeting a need. It raises an interesting point, because the reason I wrote the book is I'm trying to convince people, get people to be aware that it is so important to understand energy if you're trying to understand what's happening in the world. And surprisingly, so few people are, focused on both foreign policy and on technology and markets, that this overlap is much smaller than you would think. And as you suggest, there are many fewer books on this really important topic than you would imagine.
It's like, in my view, just more for your ratification, I did my graduate work at Columbia School of International Affairs. So
fantastic. I introduced the book there this week.
Oh, well, for whatever reason, they added the words. When I was there, it was the School of International Affairs, and then they did School of International and Public Affairs. And by the way, you know why they did it? This you could never guess. If I kept you in a room in solitude, you couldn't guess it. I'll tell you why.
Tell me.
All right, here it's mind blowing. The School of International Affairs initials were SIA. And because they felt it sounded too much like CIA, they
really?
Yes, nobody admits this, but everybody at the time knew it, and there's no other reason to have changed its name. But a lot of students did go from the SIA to the CIA. It was known at the time. Then this is the 70s. That's when I was there, and they were afraid to be identified with the CIA. Isn't that weird?
That is interesting. I've never heard that, but I'll have to ask some of my Columbia friends about that.
But from that time, later ones won't know this. But if from the 70s when they changed it. All right, anyway. So this is awesome. All right, so let's go down the list. It's affected America tremendously. It has affected the Middle East. It has affected Russia. Who else is it? China. So the fact that we now have the United States and others have an abundance of energy, of oil specifically, and natural gas. This is, it means, for example, I assume the Middle East cannot hold us in blackmail.
Well, I want to talk about that specifically, but I just want to reinforce the point you're making, that this increase in oil and gas production in the United States has had a huge impact on the world. And it's done that because it's transformed markets for oil and gas that other countries are...
All right, hold on there. This is really, really important. The book is Windfall. It is up at DennisPrager.com. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back. My guest is Professor Meghan O'Sullivan at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. And she's written a very important book about how the new energy abundance has changed just about everything. It's called Windfall. It's exactly what's happened. Okay, so we'd begun now with the Middle East, or whatever you want to begin with on its impact. Go ahead.
No, you mentioned, what has been the impact of this energy surge in America on the Middle East and our relationships there? I think this is probably the most commonly misunderstood relationship here, because it's true that the United States no longer needs to import huge quantities of oil from Middle Eastern countries. And that's more or less a thing of the past for some time to come. But the reason that we need to look at this not just from a politics perspective, but also from a market perspective, is it doesn't really mean that the U.S. no longer needs to care about the Middle East, because we're still tied to the global oil market, and they're still tied to the global market. So even if we're not consuming a drop of Saudi oil, if something happens in that kingdom and they stop producing oil, then the whole world is going to experience a price spike, and that includes the United States. And actually, the price that Americans pay to fill up their car at the gas station is determined by this global supply and demand. So, we may have a different relationship with the Middle East in the sense that we don't need to talk to them as much about oil. We're not as much interested in their specific oil policies, but we're still interested in Middle East stability because that affects this global market that we're a part of.
All right, so let me understand, because I don't understand. If the Saudis tomorrow stop pumping oil and
Right.
America is completely, which it isn't now, but I don't think, but let's say it
No.
were. Let's say we were completely self-sufficient. Why would that have a big impact on us?
Right. Okay. There are two assumptions here, but the main one is that we're completely self-sufficient, and the thing is we're not. We have gone from being overwhelmingly dependent on foreign oil. So 10 years ago, 2/3 of the oil we consumed was imported from foreign countries. That number is now down to about 20%. So that's a big decrease.
Right, from
But
66
still,
to 20. Wow.
Wow, it's huge in a very short period of time. But that still means that 1 out of every 5 barrels we consume comes from another country. And that means that we're part of a global market.
Can we, forgive me, can we change that?
We could. And I write about this in the book, that there are policies that we could adopt, but I don't think those policies would be wise for us to adopt because they actually would be very costly and they would be very inefficient. So we might be able to get to this place where we could say comfortably we're an energy island, but we'd end up, paying a lot more for our energy because we wouldn't be able to take advantage of some of the efficiencies. Like, for example, we take some oil from Mexico and we refine it in places like Houston and other places because it makes economic sense. And then we export some of our oil to other parts of the world where their refineries are better suited to it. And that just, the market moves the oil in that direction because that's the most efficient use and it allows everybody to have access it at the lowest price. If we decided that we were not going to allow for any of those kinds of trade and we introduced a lot of, incentives and subsidies to increase production even beyond where it is today, we could get to that energy island place. But I don't think it would make us more secure. Think about what happened under Harvey. So when Harvey struck and a lot of American production and refining ceased for a short period of time, what happened? We started importing a lot of those products from other countries. And that was easy to do because we were integrated into the market. We had
All right. Okay.
terminals,
So all right. So look, 1/5 is a hell of a lot different from 2/3, as you obviously write and acknowledge. Let's go to Russia. Russia was exporting a lot more oil than it is now, a lot more energy. So it's in trouble, correct?
Well, Russia is a big exporter of oil and gas. And natural gas has been the thing that has really given it a strategic edge. It actually is still exporting a lot of oil and gas. What's different is it's getting a different price. It's getting much fewer revenues. And it basically is no longer calling the shots because the markets now, if you think about it, if you're a European consumer, you used to, you bought natural gas from Russia and you didn't have a lot of alternatives. So Russia really had the upper hand in setting the price, setting the terms, making you commit to a contract that maybe was 20 years.
So it's become a buyer's market instead of a seller's market.
That's exactly right. And that's a big shift from the way the world was 10
And you
years ago.
believe that this is causing more, not less Russian mischief?
Well, I believe it's causing more Russian mischief in the short and maybe medium term because basically it puts President Putin in a box. He basically he no longer can deliver the economic benefits that his popularity rested on for quite a long time. So because the price of oil has gone down, the price of gas has gone down, his revenues have gone down. The Russian people, they're not on the brink of revolution, but they definitely are not enjoying economic prosperity. And so he needs to give them something else. And what does he give them? He gives them pride, national pride.
Exactly.
He gives
right.
them he gives them a sense
Yes,
of,
which is what a lot of dictators do. Okay,
Yeah.
one final question. What is the biggest reason
Sure.
for American energy independence? Fracking?
Yeah, I would say it's technology, it's American innovation, it's American ingenuity. This was started, there was some help from the government, but it was largely small companies, entrepreneurs who were persistent, who were determined to unlock what they knew was vast quantities of American
That's
resources.
what Americans need to know, what these companies have done. Anyway,
pretty amazing.
All right, it's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for writing the book, and thanks for coming on.
Well, thanks for having me. Have a good day.
You too. Meghan O'Sullivan, a professor at the Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government. The book is Windfall, about what energy abundance has done to the world. All right, my friends, it's been a joy to be with you. Do help us save the children again. We got a banner up. What is today's release at Prager? You have a Thursday release. What is it again? Oh, I love that. Why self-esteem is self-defeating. That you will enjoy, and your kid must see it. I'll see you tomorrow, everybody. I'm Dennis Prager. Thank you for listening. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Friday edition of my show. I'm Dennis Prager. It is a joy to be with you. A professor, Phil Zuckerman, professor of sociology, and are you ready? Secular studies. To have a professor of secular studies at radically secular institutions is like having a professor of air. No, it's not true. Air needs to be studied. I can't even think of an analogy. How do you like that? Because the absurdity has reached a level where you can't mock it. There's nothing left. A professor of secular studies at a secular institution. Okay, fine. And he has the chutzpah to write a piece, Alternative Christianity. How the evangelicals who support President Trump are not the real Christians. So a professor a man who believes in nothing religious is telling the religious how to be true to their religion. Awesome. It's one they do have chutzpah. I mean, it's so you don't know how simplistic it's. Here's a typical thing. Consider what Jesus taught about violence and weapons. They're bad. He who lives by the sword dies by the sword, he said, Matthew 26. The White House embraces America's powerful gun lobby and does so despite terrible mass shootings that have become routine. That's it. So you see, this is deep, isn't it? Jesus said those who live by the sword die by the sword. So do good people who wield swords, in his view, Jesus would say that good people who wielded swords against bad people, they are just as bad as the bad people, because no matter who wields a sword, they will die by the sword. That's what he believes. By the way, the evangelical community is awesome. It's my favorite community in the United States. Well, I think they're tied with Mormons. I love those two communities very much. I'm very impressed with both. My fear in the case of evangelicals, I don't know if it's happening in LDS, but among evangelicals, my fear is, because I know this for a fact, some of the evangelical schools are simply drifting. And by the way, for those of you who are evangelical, I'll tell you the symptom. Here is the issue where you know that things are getting bad and that evangelicals are adopting the values of the mainstream left of the Western world, even though they will continue to have a fervent belief in the Bible and in Jesus. But it won't matter. You can believe in the Bible and Jesus and have terrible values. There's no guarantee in life. It helps, but it's no guarantee. So here are the two issues. One is the environment. As soon as you get to talk about global warming from an evangelical or any other erstwhile conservative, you know that they have begun to assimilate into the value system of the left. Now you'll say, that's absurd, Dennis. To care about the environment makes you a leftist? No, to care about the environment makes you rational. To believe that the Western world's economy should be essentially destroyed over a 1 degree Fahrenheit reduction by the end of this century, and believe that we are in an existential crisis of all living beings, that's leftist. Get the difference? If you don't get the difference, I'm not going to say it again. They're so dramatic. If you don't care about the environment, you're out of your mind. We live in an environment. How can you not care about it? But don't let caring about the environment is to environmentalism what caring for workers was to communism. Okay? Everybody cares about workers. Communists claimed it, and they said if you weren't a communist, you really didn't care about workers. So if you're not on the left-wing page on environmentalism, you don't really care about the environment. They structure the debate and the definitions. The other way to check off whether or not an evangelical, you know what I'm going to refer to? What is the other thing that tells you, these people have abandoned biblical values, is Israel. Once they start that, you know that they're lost. We'll be back in a moment. This is fundraising month, August, for Prager University. We fight in a very, very sophisticated way with highly distinguished presenters of our videos. Do you know that Brett Stephens' video has now been restricted by YouTube? It gives you it's the 34th Prager University video. You must understand, if you know who I have less and less patience for, and I'm sorry, and I always add, I still love these people personally. Any conservative who denies we're in a civil war in this country, an adult should never deny reality. There is something immature about, I'm not saying they are immature. I'm talking about a human is much larger than any one issue. But it is an immaturity to deny the severity of an issue. I wish it were different. It is a civil war in this country. YouTube and Google and the universities and the media are all on the left and wish to squash us. Do you understand that? If you don't, you're a fool. I'm sorry. I'm alienating some listeners, but I will never patronize you. I can't stand adult foolishness. If you don't want to fight because you rather spend time with your family and you rather see more films and you rather take trips and you rather work hard, I understand that. So just say it. I don't want to fight. But you're right, Dennis. They wish to squash all non-left-wing thought in this country. They will do whatever they can. 34 of our videos have been put on restricted list by YouTube. 34 out of about 234. The Wall Street Journal made reference to it again in an editorial last week with Google, and they brought in Prager University. So the only way around these people is more money to market it in every way we can. Okay? So if you don't want to fight, help me fight. I understand that. I'm not angry at those who aren't fighting. I'm angry at those who deny that there is a left-right civil war in this country. May it always be nonviolent. And if it is violent, it is 99% of the time left-wing violence. Right-wingers do not take over offices of deans and presidents of schools. Right-wingers do not take over state capitals. Right-wingers do not have riots. Right-wingers do not shoot Democratic congressmen. Left-wingers shoot Republican congressmen. Okay? But this is it's all ignored. Must say, I never got so passionate about promoting Prager University. So help us. We change minds. It is the only avenue to non-left-wing thought for vast numbers of young people in this country. Okay? It's as simple as that. The only avenue they have. It is stunning to them. Remember the 26-year-old that called from Venezuela? He did not know that there were conservative ideas. He did not know that. The opposition to Maduro in Venezuela is not conservative. It's another left-winger who thinks Maduro's corrupt. Reminds me of the people, the communists who went to the Gulag and were tortured. And they all thought, oh, if Comrade Stalin only knew what was happening to us, this would not happen. It's leftism. It's irrelevant who the person is. Irrelevant. So please, PragerU.com, 3235 I fight. That my nature is to fight. The left is destroying the West. Okay? It's as simple as that. If you don't know that, you don't know what is happening in the West. Hey, hey, ho, ho, Western Civ has got to go. That's their chant. You're a denier, to use their favorite phrase now. If you don't understand the left is destroying Western civilization, you are a denier. That's one of the reasons they are preoccupied with the existential threat to life of global warming, because it focuses away. It gives them a cause. They're very big on causes. So it gives their life meaning. It's a soulless universe, the left. It is soulless. It is radically secular. There is no meaning. There was an article in the New York Times. Remember, it was unbelievable. A professor, no, he wasn't, a graduate student in philosophy. Let's be honest, life has no meaning. It is purposeless. And then I debate atheists, and they go, oh, it's not purposeless. I feel purpose. Yes, because you made it up. But there is no objective purpose. Just like they believe there's no objective gender. That's not a destruction of civilization. There is no male-female. There are male-female animals, but no male-female humans. Do you understand this? We're supposed to believe this. They're pro-science. But if you are born or if you have a uterus and a vagina and eventually breasts and double X chromosome and produce eggs, you're not a female. You understand that? And they're pro-science. Now, I don't care if an individual wants to reconstruct themselves and be a member of the other sex and be regarded as such, that's fine. My argument is not with the individual. My argument was the claim that there's no male-female. The binary, we don't want a binary definition of gender. It's what your kids get at school. And I mean early in school. I mean in elementary school. There's a camp. Listen, Michael Medved show. He had a guest on who runs a camp for kids with no gender. I really want to send my kid there. No boys and girls at our camp. How did they put them in bunks? I wonder. By the way, is it just by alphabetical order? Oh God. Talking about religion and stuff, the staggering mistake of having made this pope. There's a powerful article, and it's very distressing because I just had it up. How did that happen? It's like my website has its own mind. Anyway, a piece in the Wall Street Journal that Pope Francis is much harder on Donald Trump than on Maduro in Venezuela. You'd think if anybody had clout in South America, it's a South American Pope. Now, I know he's condemned what's happening, but it's an important piece anyway. All right, my friends, 1-8-PRAGER 776-877-243-7776. Call that number now, please, and help us with PragerU. 323-5-PRAGER. And I'm distorted so often, like in the New York Times. hit piece on me where it said Dennis Prager suggested or suggests that same-sex marriage will lead to incest and polygamy. Never said such a thing in my life. And their own quote 7 paragraphs later of me on the issue proves it, but doesn't matter. They write it. They didn't write it with quotes. They didn't write it with a source because there is none. That is, that's the paper of record. We're in very bad shape. We're truly, truly in bad shape. And yes, if you are a Christian and you're on the left, you are a fool. It doesn't mean you're not a nice person. You know, I'm very precise with words. You can be a nice and kind and honorable person and a fool. It's not the entirety of a human being to be a fool. But to join the forces that wish to end you is an act of such staggering foolishness that it's breathtaking. And I mean the left, I don't mean liberals. It doesn't matter how many times I say it, it still doesn't always come through. Westminster, South Carolina, and J.R. Hello, J.R.
Mr. Prager, it is indeed an honor to speak with you, and unfortunately, your previous caller didn't quite have it right. Of course, he mentioned himself as a man of faith, but not a Christian, which is a specific difference. But
yes, no, of course it is. I would have loved to stay on with me because I got to take a break, and I don't want to interrupt your monologue or your statement. Monologue is too big a word, but so we'll be back in a moment. But when people are people of faith but they have no religion, I always have a series of questions to ask. We'll be back in a moment. Hello, everybody. I'm Dennis Prager, and let's go back to South Carolina and J.R. Okay, J.R., take it away.
Mr. Prager, I tell you, I appreciate everything you do. My daughters, with 3 generations in my household, absolutely love you. And,
thank you.
I'll just say, listen, when you remove religion out of a society, then basically people are able to justify whatever they think, is right in their own minds, because there is no formulative spiritual guidelines that really helps to give course to a man's life. And that's why we find ourselves, in this whole situation, in this society of indoctrination. Think back in 2008, and as an African-American, but there were people that asked me, did you vote for Barack Obama? No, I didn't vote for Barack Obama. And just the thought, because they figured that I could associate with someone not based on his character, but just on the complexion of his skin, and he and I had absolutely nothing.
I know, why isn't it demeaning?
And it was, and I found it, and I won't say offensive, but I found that it just how silly, even in this day and time, because when you listen to Obama and you really began to study what he says, I'm like, it sounded like the same progressive, left-wing, socialist/communist rhetoric that you heard with, Lenin and Stalin, and people don't even know, like Enver Hoxha and Tito and Hugo Chavez, Slobodan Milosevic, and on.
By the way, anybody, I just got to say to you, anybody who remembers Enver Hoxha,
yes, sir,
you are one impressive dude, my friend. I got to tell you that I didn't think I'd hear this guy's name again.
From Albania.
Yeah, that's right.
And so now as you say it all the time, and we appreciate everything you do. That's why, you go back to the 60s, the first in our country. You see, I was born during the Eisenhower administration, so I can, and I remember the progression of things, or digression, if you will. But in the 60s, when they took prayer out of schools, and so now when you take that spiritual consciousness out of, then you go to the next decade, then the 70s, and then, abortion is legalized. So when, man has no conscience, then life has no meaning. And then from that point on,
right.
Then when you break down the families on.
Well, listen, thank you. God bless you, and God bless the 3 generations of your family. I could listen to you for an hour and just cheer. By the way, I just for the record, he is not comparing. He's talking about rhetoric. He was not comparing Barack Obama or any of these Democrats to Enver Hoxha and Stalin and Lenin. I mean, just want to make that clear, because obviously that's beyond the pale. Those people were mass murderers. These people are not. So, okay. So for the record, because everything that goes on my show is monitored, I want it to be morally clear. But in any event, I need to find you something. I can't believe this. I am doing, among other things, but this is really taking up vast amounts of my time, and has for decades. But now it's almost every moment that I can. I'm working on my commentary on the first 5 books of the Bible. It's an incredible endeavor, and what can I tell you? It's also, I love it. I really love it. It is very, very hard, and I do love it. There is a quote that I have in there of Lincoln. I was talking about the question of collective guilt, where God holds the Egyptians. Why does God bring the plagues on all the Egyptians? I deal with virtually every moral problem in the first 5 books of the Bible. And people say, why did God punish all of the Egyptians? Putting aside the unique problem of the firstborn plague, the 10th. Why didn't God just punish the guilty? So I speak about the question of national guilt. And one of the quotes I give is Lincoln, who said during the Civil War, if God so deems it, that I'm paraphrasing, that for every lash we suffer more as Americans. We pay with our blood for the blood of the lashes of slaves. Then God knows what He's doing. I'm very wildly paraphrasing. It's a very powerful thing, but he says, look, we committed a national crime with slavery, and we're paying a national price. But then he goes on to say, and this is what I learn in the Bible, without which, how would we know right from wrong? This is Lincoln. He's a hero. He's one of the few heroes of both the left and the right in the United States. How would we know? And then the secularists, what, are you kidding? I need the Bible to tell me what is right and wrong? But Lincoln had more wisdom than these professors. People get it wrong. Doesn't mean that everybody who believes in the Bible is good or knows the clarity, has moral clarity. Doesn't mean that people who reject the Bible have no moral clarity. But as a general statement, Lincoln was right. I'm merely stating I'm stating with this evidence what the last caller, JR, was talking about. It's a very hard thing to make a good society. That's one of the reasons for my antipathy to the left. They only know to destroy. That's what they're great at. I always use the Boy Scouts as my favorite example. Where's the left-wing Boy Scouts? What does the left wing do to build character in young men? Nothing! Okay? They know how to destroy the Boy Scouts, but they don't make a Boy Scouts. That is the left in a nutshell. In a nutshell, you have it. Back in a moment. You are listening to the Dennis Prager Show, 1-8-Prager-776. It's a very powerful video, a truly charming, ultra-bright young black woman gives it. It's really powerful. Here's the Lincoln quote. I had the time to look it up here. And this is not a man who regularly attended church, but he did read the Bible every day. Abraham Lincoln. In regard to this great book, I have but to say it is the best gift God has given to man. Which is totally what I believe. Totally. I'm telling you, I'm so in sync with the great Americans, the founders, and Lincoln. I have an emotional reaction. It gives me chills. Values-wise, I'm so deeply American. And here is the line in the rest of that sentence. But for it, we could not know right from wrong. Now, technically, we have a conscience that predates the Bible. God expected people to know right from wrong in certain ways even before a Bible. I totally agree. I know all that stuff really well. But this is what gave us the written form, elucidated, to try to do something good in this world, which is a very hard thing to do. Yes, indeed. Leaf in Delano, Minnesota. Or is it Delano?
It is Delano.
Okay, hi.
Thank you for taking my call.
Thank you for calling.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment about your last comment there before you break about the left, and they can't really know how to do anything positive when it comes to men and stuff with the Boy Scouts, like you mentioned. And it just got me thinking real quick how the left really considers men in general, or what a man is, basically a bad thing or a dirty word. So, of course, with the Boy Scouts training up young men to be good quality.
Oh, yes, you're right. That's right. Yes, that's such a good point. The very term making boys into men offends the left. That is correct. First of all, who are you to even assume you know that they'll be a man? They may be a woman. Number two, it implies that being a man is something really good. But that's a macho, patriarchal view. That's right. Just remember, it is easy to destroy. It is hard to build. Happiness Hour coming up on the Dennis Prager Show.